Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ice Time. We dive into some big ideas around the NHL. I'm Mike Fink, and I'm joined again because I had Alex Chauvancy on earlier in the season. It's great having you on. Covers the New Jersey Devils and the NHL at large, and for NJD on the Rush, the hockey writers, whole does a whole bunch. Basically, one of the premier hockey voices, I think, especially for the Devils, which is fun to talk about. We probably have a lot to talk about with the Devils, but we're talking general NHL stuff. Alex, how are you doing on this Monday afternoon?
Cold, but otherwise I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
Yeah, cold is a good way to put it. It is that time of year. What is it? It's we've had negative degree weather in the New Jersey, New York area, and around the country. It's been cold, it's been snowy. Yeah, it's been that time of year. But I guess that means that the Olympic freeze, the roster freeze, is around the corner. So we're at that point in the year, which is a good like almost like a break in the season. But otherwise, uh, yeah, it's been busy with the NHL games, a lot of games going on. We have a fun topic I love talking about. It's one of those that I love revisiting at least once a year. But before we do that, let's actually dive into some news. We're recording this Monday afternoon, and this morning, Barry Trotz steps down. Is that the right word for this? I think so. Yeah, Barry Trotz steps down as a like as in I'm retiring, no longer the GM of the Nashville Predators. I just your quick thoughts on this.
Yeah, it was a little surprising because I don't really think there was any inkling that this was going to happen anytime soon. But I saw like some of the quotes from what Trotz said, and he apparently had approached Nashville's ownership back in early December about stepping down when his contract expires. Then they had talks, and they figured it'd be best to do this. Now, he actually technically hasn't stepped down yet. He'll be finishing out the process until they find a successor, but I would imagine that's going to be in the next few months, maybe around the draft. Who knows? But yeah, it was a little surprising, and in a sense, also maybe not that surprising because he's not had the best resume, I guess, as Nashville Predators general manager. It hasn't gone all that well for him. So, I mean, it's possible that they could make an upgrade with whoever they get next. I think what you'll remember from Barry Trotz, obviously, is his tenure as a head coach more so than what he was as a general manager. Because what he did in Nashville, I think, kind of set back the organization a few years for the most part, and they've looked better this season. But still, the next GM is going to have his work cut out for him.
Yeah, I think that when you hear this news of stepping down, you immediately think, okay, there's more here. Whether there was pressure for him to step down, or whether he wanted to step down, whether I think, man, the more I think about it, I'm like, he never was meant to be a GM. He never was like he's a great head coach, and that's where he is. You see it all the time where great head coaches try to become GMs and it doesn't work out. And he's meant to be behind the bench. And I wonder, there's almost two layers to this. One, does he end up becoming the Predators head coach at some point? And two, I think he has that urge to still coach. He had that. There's actually a discussion with Kyle Dubas that he had over coffee, which I think was a little funny that they had that to begin with. But anyway, they had it like overseas before one of the games, and he talked about, yeah, I kind of miss being in control or being on the behind the bench and having an impact every day, which GMs really don't have. I think he's going to coach somewhere. Do you see another team potentially saying, "All right, we're going to bring you in once you get a new GM"?
Yeah, I definitely think there'll be some teams that approach him for sure. This coming off season when the coaching carousel gets going, assuming that the Predators haven't found their successor to him yet. But I mean, I don't know, what is he, like 63, 64 years old? I think maybe this could be it for him. Maybe he doesn't want to coach again, or I'm sure he's not going to be a general manager again, so we don't have to worry about that. But I'm sure there's some teams who look at his track record, his resume as a head coach, and think, especially if they're maybe a team that hasn't been able to get over the hump in the playoff race or make a deep run in the playoffs. I could see a team reaching out to him. What team that could be, I'm not really sure yet because there hasn't been a coaching firing this season, right? So,
Well,
uh,
there was the Rick Bonus
oh
firing.
right, yeah, that's right.
I
Rick
mean,
Bonus
not Rick
taking
Bonus. Rick Bonus got hired, but
Yeah,
yeah,
he taking over for Dean Evison. That's right. So yeah, but I mean, we don't really know what the coaching carousel is going to look like yet, but I'm sure he'll have interest this summer.
Well, yeah, I think there's a few teams already you kind of circle because teams might fire their head coach even if it's a good head coach just because they know Barry Trotz. You look at his track record. Nashville as a head coach, they played above their weight, won a cup with the Washington Capitals, and the Islanders played above their weight when he was there, and he particularly cleans up defense. So you look at some of these teams that are struggling defensively this season, whether it's the Maple Leafs who have struggled defensively. Maybe the Devils would do it. I don't know if that's just throwing that out there, but you look at some of these teams, and I'm like, maybe they'll get that. They're going to be interested. They're going to be interesting to watch. But I digress on that. Just a whole different discussion there. But the bottom line, yeah, he's out. I part of me wonders what kind of GM. Like it's going to be interesting to see just like what Nashville. I mean, Nashville. They'll bring in a rebuilding GM now that they kind of realized, okay, this isn't working. It's going to be interesting to see there. But I digress on that. Well, I actually brought you on though because this is a fun topic I like doing, which is especially this time of year when you can look back, and it's called "What If," where we look back at some things and say, "What if this was different?" or "What if this thing happened?" or what. Just it gets you into these rabbit holes, these sliding door moments, and it's always fun to kind of just look back and think about them. So I'll ask you first to go ahead, and what is your big what if? This is something you probably have asked yourself a few times this season, but what's your big what if this season?
I think my what if this season is what if the San Jose Sharks won the draft lottery last season and they had Matthew Schaefer instead of the New York Islanders? I mean, it's obviously been great for the Islanders. He's made a huge difference for them, and that he's part of why they're in the playoff spot as we do this recording. But if you look at the Sharks, they've been the surprise team of the NHL this season. And well, they're missing more than one defenseman, but what's the one thing they're really missing on that team is a true number one defenseman right now. And if the lottery balls had fallen the way they should have, which I think the Sharks had the highest odds of getting the first pick in the last draft, and they got Matthew Schaefer, that team could look a whole lot more dangerous. And they're already pretty dangerous as is, at least offensively. But defensively, they need a lot of help back there. And Sam Dickinson, he could be a really good player down the road. But right now he's obviously not a number one defenseman. And if you look at what Schaefer has done with the Islanders, to kind of picture him, what if he was on the Sharks instead of the Islanders, could definitely make a difference for them.
It's so funny. That is one of the ones that I have. I'm like, that is an obvious the draft, revisiting the draft is an obvious one where the Islanders just so random that they won the lottery because they were like eighth or ninth. They were
Yeah,
yeah,
even
and
might
all of a
even been
sudden,
lower than that too.
yeah, maybe even 10th or something.
Yeah.
But they were you expect, okay, maybe they move up a little bit, but they went all the way up to one and get Matthew Schaefer, and it really changes their whole franchise. And you look at the Sharks and they get number two, and Michael Misa might be a great player someday, but you could already tell just the impact Schaefer's having with the Islanders and what he could have done with the Sharks. They could have had Macklin. Yeah, it's just amazing. Macklin Celebrini, who might be the best forward in the future, best future forward to build around, and Matthew Schaefer, who's probably the best defenseman. They could have had that. They could have had the next version of McKinnon and McCarr, which would have been wild to think about. I think another layer to the draft that I think looking back is just what if is what if some teams draft differently. I think there's some teams that you wonder, do they regret, and really in the first round, how they approach the first round per se. I look at, let's say, Utah. The fact that I wonder if Utah, they had the number 4 pick, is do they regret drafting Caleb Denoyer, who's a talented prospect, the number projected to be a top 6 center someday. But you wonder with Utah is, do they regret maybe not trading the pick, finding a way to trade that pick for an elite player right now? In Utah, they're a borderline playoff team, but say they could have gotten, I'm just throwing this trade out there, say it could have worked. I know that looking back, they wouldn't have made this deal, is Tage Thompson for 4. I know they traded JJ Paterka, so you could tell maybe they could have done a different type of trade, but if they would have done things differently. And then there's some teams that, whether it's the best player on the board or the need, they sometimes took the best player, sometimes it's need, and you wonder if any of those teams regret it. I look at the Flyers, for example, at 7 or at 6. They took Porter Martone, the best player I think they're on the board, but maybe they regret taking James Higgins. They don't have a center now, and they could have gotten an elite center there. Instead, they trade up to get Jack Nesbitt. You just look at all those other things. Is there another sliding doors moment you think, like, if any team looking back at the draft has that really stands out to you?
Not from this past draft, because going into that draft, most people didn't expect this draft to have too many impact players. But you look at what Schaefer has done, and then Michael Misa has played a little bit for San Jose. I think Ben Kindle in Pittsburgh too. He was a later pick, and he's been a pretty good one of the better rookies in the NHL this season too. But yeah, I think as far as the last draft, probably for me, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. I think Schaefer is probably the biggest one for sure, just because he was the first overall pick and the Islanders jumped so far ahead to get that pick.
Oh yeah, that's the one that stands out. It's interesting because I think it's early to kind of say, all right, let's look back and say this team already regrets this pick because we don't know how these players are going to turn out, except for, I guess, obviously Matthew Schaefer, who is the number one, who already looks like the number one player in the draft, and one of those actual generational talents. We throw that term out all the time and stuff, and usually it doesn't work out that way, but this time it is, and it's really cool to see just what he's done. The other parts of that, yeah, what happens to the Islanders there because if they don't get the number of picks, say they get the 11th or 10th, and okay, like they take Jake O'Brien or something like that, someone or Roger McQueen, someone who's good. But all of a sudden, you're looking at the Islanders and you're like, are they still a retooling team? Maybe they are another seller. They're not second or third in the Metropolitan Division the like they are right now. You wonder about that part too. I think, by the way, a draft sliding doors moment. I feel like we go on for days about this. Is the 2022 draft, which the Devils had the second pick, and they take Shimon Nemetz, and they pass on Logan Cooley, which is an example of they took the best. They took the need. They needed defensemen, so they took a defenseman. But they take Logan Cooley, then you have a top nine of Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, and Logan Cooley. And Logan Cooley could always slide into the top six, although he's hurt now, so probably wouldn't have been the best pick. But I digress on that.
Yeah,
We probably
I
have
see a
so
lot of that on Devils Twitter, debating whether who they should have taken in that draft. I see obviously Logan Cooley, like you said, is one, but I see Shane Wright sometimes too. Even going back to the 2020 draft, taking Alexander Holtz over Marco Rossi, because if they had Marco Rossi, maybe they could have traded for Quinn Hughes too, since he
yeah.
was in part of the package. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to do revisionist history on these kind of things all the time too, but I see it a lot on Devil's Twitter about Simone Nemitz in the 2022 draft.
You mentioned Quinn Hughes, and that actually leads into one of my what ifs, which
I was gonna have
is
this one as well.
yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap here. I think
Yeah,
we're kind of because there's a lot of these big stories. I'm like, what if my what if the way I phrase it is, what if Jim Rutherford just doesn't say anything? Which like, okay, that's a big what if.
yeah,
Really moving mountains for this one, but it's the fact that it's not the fact that maybe he was going to trade Quinn Hughes, but it's the fact that he said, well, he's a free agent in 2 years and he wants to play with his brothers. And the only way we can do that is by getting Luke Hughes and Jack Hughes. So I guess we got to trade Quinn Hughes. And it's the fact that he just kind of threw that out there. It changes three franchises, possibly more, but for sure it's the big three. It changes the Wild, it changed the Devils because now the Devils, all they can think about is we were supposed to have Quinn Hughes. If this news never gets out there, if there's you never hear of it and you just hear, oh, they're shopping Quinn Hughes because he's a free agent soon. They don't know why, but I mean, they just know, okay, the Canucks need to rebuild. They're at the bottom of the Western Conference. It's a lot different than, oh yeah, he's gone. Oh yeah, he's going to the Devils, which everyone assumed was going to happen. There's that part of it, which is obviously the fact that the Devils have not been the same since the news got out there, changed how they've operated, and for sure how they've operated since. Where now it's the pressure to make a move, but they can't make a move. It's all this extra stress that's gotten into the locker room for sure. And then there's the layer to it where the Wild come in, and now the Wild are a different team, which is fascinating for a few reasons because they swoop in and get Quinn Hughes. So you don't know if you have him long term or not, but you know your championship window is now. And how you operate with that championship window being a 2 year window is fascinating to me because I don't think Bill Guerin's had this. If you don't get Quinn Hughes, then you're just all right. You're a good team, but your window starts with Kirill Kaprizov's contract. You have a long time to build around him and Brock Faber, but now it's okay. You have to win now, and you have to do everything possible to win now. So there's so many layers to this. There's also the Canucks side of things where maybe the Canucks aren't that bad, knowing they could keep Quinn Hughes, but once they realized, okay, he might be gone. Okay, they not as good. Your thoughts on just the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, I think when the Quinn Hughes trade happened, it was all a bit of a surprise to most of us because I don't think a lot of us thought it was going to happen that quickly. But for me, I was going to frame it like, what if the Devils ended up with Quinn Hughes instead of Minnesota? Like, I'm pretty sure they would probably be in a playoff spot right now, despite the rest of the flaws that they have on their roster. I think Quinn Hughes is that dynamic. Like most of the time forwards are the game breakers, but there's exceptions like Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. And I guess like lesser extent guys like Josh Morrissey and Zach Werenski. But like Quinn Hughes is a game-changing defenseman, and I think if the Devils had added him to their roster, they'd probably be third in the division. I think I would have to think he would make that much of a difference for them, despite them not being able to. He would add more offense to them. Their defense would become more stable because they're always playing in the offensive zone. Um, at the same time, Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen would probably be having better seasons too. And then you look at now he's with Minnesota. And what's gonna that division? I mean, they're on a collision course for the Dallas Stars in the first round of the playoffs too, and they'll have to get past Colorado to advance in the Western Conference playoffs. So there's that dynamic as well. Then the Canucks, obviously, they trade him, and they were for the longest time said they were not rebuilding. But I think in the last like couple of weeks they had that video with Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin saying like, "Hey, we've entered a rebuild now." Like you said, it's like three franchises here that have been changed so much, and it's not really, I think, just those three franchises. It's also, yeah, now the Colorado Avalanche and the Minnesota Wild or the Dallas Stars will have to game plan for him in the playoffs because that's the way the bracket is looking right now. I think we're not going to, I would be surprised if we get a trade that big again ahead of the trade deadline. I think that was the biggest one we're going to get this season. But I think just the way it's changed everything in the NHL for so many teams, it's hard to understate its impact.
And I think what's interesting is with the Devils, it's they were like they're not only are they going to be good now, but you look at just the way the Metropolitan Division is shaping up. The fact that Islanders and Penguins are 2-3 right now. That if they were in that spot, say they swap the Islanders or
Or
Penguins,
the
either one,
Penguins, yeah.
you're looking at just the path to the in a playoff run is looks very good for them. I think it's interesting because yeah, you're talking about the player himself, just the value he brings, the expected goals maybe, and all the stuff about what he does, all the offensive zone and the impact he has defensively. And that's true. He does make this team. He would make any team better. The other layer to this is just the way the team responds. I think the Wild as a whole have played better. When you have Quinn Hughes on your team, you play better. I mean, it's just it's a fact. Like when you have a star in your lineup, you know your contending window is open. You're gonna play above your weight. You're gonna play better than you usually would when you're just when you're a tanking team or when you're a bottom feeder team. And you look at the way the team is played, knowing okay, we don't have Quinn Hughes. It's changed a lot about how the Devils have played. They have not. You have look at a lot of players that have underachieved because it's you because they don't have him there, and they don't also it's the Devils part of it is they don't make that splash. And with the Wild also the other fascinating I mean the fascinating part to me also is them and the Oilers are in the same kind of boat there, where it's your championship window is now. You have a player on a ticking clock, and what you do next is interesting. Even if you're going to run into the Stars or run into the Avalanche, you have to do everything you can to prepare. And I think what's interesting is what you do next with Bill Guerin. What does he do now? Now all of a sudden the pressure's on him. He's never had this pressure to buy in like he has, and now he has to do that. And that's why Jesper Wallstedt is on the trade block, a great young goalie to build around. But you have to trade him probably because you need a number one or number two top line center or top six center. I'm going off on this a lot. We probably could talk for this is probably the big one to talk about. Quinn Hughes, just because he's been the story, probably the biggest one of the season. But I'll turn it over to you, which is what's another what if that you have on the top off the top of your head?
Yeah, so another what if I have is what if Sasha Barkov didn't get injured before the season, tearing his ACL and MCL, which I'm probably assuming we won't see him again this season unless the Panthers get into the playoffs. But we look at the Atlantic Division and how crazy it's been this year, in a good way. I mean, there's so many good teams in the Atlantic. Montreal and Buffalo have been much better than expected. The Lightning look like the best team in the Eastern Conference. Ottawa has they're a good team, despite what their record says. They've just gotten sunken by goaltending. Um, the Panthers, they've been out of a playoff spot pretty much the entire season, but would that be the case with Barkov? Probably not. And I think you could, I guess, a lesser extent, you would say Matthew Tkachuk too, if he hadn't missed the first, 2 to 3 months of the season. That's another factor. But I think Barkov is really, he's a driver of what they want to do because he's such a good two-way center. He's back-to-back Selke trophies, if I'm not mistaken. So I think you look at that. What if he had not gotten injured? Would they be contending with the Lightning for first place in the Atlantic right now? I think you could make that case for sure. They're definitely the rest of the roster is good enough, but when you lose someone who's as important as Barkov, they're fighting for their playoff lives right now. They're going to have to claw their way back into it somehow.
And it's also you lose Barkov, you lose a player like him. You wonder if the Panthers are that good. There's that little bit of doubt that they are going to make the play. I mean, they're the Panthers; they're the best team in the NHL. But you lose a player as good as Barkov, and the question is, maybe they aren't as good. The extra layer to that is also, what if Kachuk was healthy? What if they were all healthy?
Yeah.
Maybe they start out slow. Maybe they stumble out of the gate just because, okay, this is the third run, and they know the regular season doesn't matter, but you know they're going to be in, and now you don't know that. And in the extra layer to this is the fact that the Canadians are having a great season, the Sabres are having a great season, the Red Wings are having a great season. These four teams, and you wonder, maybe they, I mean, like, probably sneak in as a wild card, but you look at the rest of these teams having great seasons, that there's this little bit of doubt now that maybe they aren't good enough. I actually want to ask you about that. Is with Barkov out, and if he misses the playoffs too, which with a torn ACL is what you assume will happen, even if he has health, even if he's back, he's not going to be 100%. Which for these playoff runs, Barkov has been that. Do you still? That's the interesting part. Is do you still? A lot of people are putting the Panthers in tier one of Cup contenders. What tier are they in?
Well, if they make the playoffs and they don't have Barkov, I guess it depends on matchup a little bit, but I would think they're a first round exit. Even if they have to play a team that's lacking experience, such as Buffalo, Montreal, or Detroit, depending on how, I guess we're probably going to get 5 teams in from the Atlantic this season, the way things are shaping up right now. So, but yeah, I mean, eventually they're going to run out of the magic they've had the last 3 years, right? Like they're due for a season like this. They've just played so much hockey the last 3 seasons that I would, at some point it was going to take a toll on that team. And now that you had the injuries to Kachuk for the first couple of months of the season and Barkov pretty much for the entire season, I would assume at this point. I think that makes a difference. I guess I think if they had Barkov, I think they would be a really good team. And even without Barkov, if you look at their numbers, they're still a pretty good team. They're just missing that one important piece. I mean, you can't replace a guy like that. It's almost impossible to do so, even if you take a by committee approach. But for me, I think if they somehow find a way to get into the playoffs this year, I don't think they're going particularly far.
That's the It's interesting. You're mentioning all the teams that they probably would play as a wild card team. I'm just thinking in my head of a them playing the Sabres or them playing the Red Wings, a team that's not been in for so long, and just I guess those whether it's a game, let's say they're a wild card team, they play like game 1 and 2 against those teams, just the energy and like anxiousness, but also the excitement of like we've got to beat this team, we to try to beat this team to get on a run, just that feeling. I think the extra part to this is just the unknown is we don't know what the trade deadline holds, and I think with all
Yeah.
these teams, someone's making an upgrade. You just don't know who, and you don't know what that upgrade is. And I think that's going to really answer the question for us. I I kind of want to wrap up a bit. Well, I'll rattle off a few what ifs just because I'll rattle off a few, and then I guess you can get your thoughts on them, and then Yeah, and then you can wrap up with a few what ifs that are just on the back off the top of your head. I'll start with one that is, what if McDavid doesn't sign the extension? It's the same idea of the ticking clock. You could imagine all the scenarios that play out from that, which is McDavid doesn't sign the extension, and how do the Oilers change? Is there pressure to go all in with them? I mean, they have that pressure in general to add, but maybe they go all in now. It's very different. Or maybe they look at how they move, how they prepare for life without McDavid. I wonder just, and maybe the stress of that gets to that team there where they do struggle and they aren't as good. And they've had their highs and lows, but what if they're outside of a playoff picture this time? There's so many sliding door moments you can think of with that one. I'll throw out another one, which is, what if this is just a general NHL one, which is like, okay, what if the rules were different? Which is, what if the overtime point didn't exist for overtime losses? And you just look at just how many teams have gotten overtime points, which explains why the standings are so clustered together. I actually wrote down the overtime loss leaders in the NHL, which are Vegas and LA have 14 overtime losses. So just like, okay, how good are they? And on the you have the Penguins have 11 of them. So also, how good are they? Flyers and Wild have 10. And then interestingly, on the other end is the Devils have two overtime losses. So they're at the
Yep.
bottom of it. So like, you wonder how maybe things even out more, or maybe that these contenders are really not as good as we think they are. The other thing that I'll just throw out there is, what if the NHL didn't have the headache of the Olympics? Because we're getting a lot of craziness, I think. So those are just the three that I'm throwing out there. Your quick thoughts on that, and then while you're at it, just to add to add your add any lingering what ifs that you might have.
Yeah, so the Olympic one is interesting because we know injuries have been a problem league wide this season. I mean, just having covered the Devils, the amount of injuries they've dealt with this season has been crazy. But I mean, even Tampa Bay, they had their injury problems in the beginning of the season with Victor Hedman and a couple of other key players missing some time. So I think that's an interesting one because I mean, we all know the schedule is condensed. They're not going to be playing hockey here for the next 3 weeks when the about 3 weeks when the Olympics start here at the end of the week. So that's an interesting one. I think we'll see how that changes when they do the World Cup in 2 years because we know the NHL is going to be starting the regular season a little earlier next year. I think it's going to be in late September instead of early October, mid-October. So if that's the case when they do the World Cup in 2 years, you might have the schedule a little more spread out than it is right now. And I think it was on 32 Thoughts recently, not maybe a couple weeks ago. Elliot Friedman was talking about how the NHL is like kind of aware that the schedule has been a little bit too much of a grind for a lot of teams this season too. So it'll be interesting to see what changes the league will make next time because I'm pretty sure the World Cup is going to be in February again, right? So there's going to be another shutdown.
But
So it'll be interesting.
it's difference between a week and like, what is it, 3 weeks off for the Olympics?
Yeah, about that,
Yeah.
right? I think like 2.5 weeks at a minimum, right? So it makes a big difference. I mean, the schedule when they come out of the Olympic break, it's not going to get any slower. I mean, there's going to be teams are going to have tons of back-to-backs. You have the playoff race heating up. You have the trade deadline. There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen in the final to 5, 6 weeks of the season. It's all going to be condensed because we're basically off for what, 2.5, 3 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see what changes the NHL makes moving forward. Another what if I have is what if Mitch Marner stayed with the Maple Leafs? It's looking pretty unlikely that they make the playoffs this season too. And if you watch them play, they have their issues. Their goaltending has not been good this season, and they've struggled defensively quite a bit. But I think still having Mitch Marner would have probably covered up a lot of the problems that they have. I think they would at least be contending with like Boston and Montreal, Buffalo. Those teams are kind of fighting, going back and forth between those last two wild card spots right now. So that was one of the bigger what ifs. I can't believe I didn't mention it at the top of the episode, but I Marner, if he had stayed in Toronto, and I think we all know that it was probably time up there anyways, but what if he had stayed and things were better there? I think the Maple Leafs would probably be in a playoff position, no problem.
What's funny is, you mentioned that, and I was like, what if that happened? I was like, a little part of me was like, oh, please no. Like, not please no, it's when like, oh, here we go again. It's actually, it feels a bit like, I actually glad that that what if doesn't happen, where he resigns and it's like, oh yeah, Toronto's my home and I really wanted to be here all along, which is like, okay, that actually would have been a good part where he grew up in Toronto and in the Ontario, in the greater Toronto area, and it was a perfect story where he got drafted by the team that he rooted for growing up, and it was a hometown kid and all that, homegrown, hometown, all those things. So that would have been nice, obviously. But the fact that we've always for years wondered what would the Maple Leafs look like if they decided to tear it down or at least start replacing pieces in the core. We always wondered what would it look like. What's the alternative? Instead, they kept running it back, and it was like, here we go again, they're running it back again with the core four, and it's the same team that's going to run into the first round, run into a team like the Bruins and Lightning or the Panthers or whatever. And it was every year it's the same story, and it feels refreshing in a way that yeah, we're getting a different story. I mean, not for Leafs fans because this is what we're what the but life without Marner, life without a core player looks like. It could have been the same with William Nylander, right? But he wanted to stay all along, so that worked out. But you're starting to see it, and it's interesting territory for them because they are questioning whether they retool, rebuild, what they do now. Because you look at just the way the Atlantic Division's shaping up, it looks like it's an impossible hill to climb, and now they might have to do that. And yeah, it's interesting. The other layer to the Olympics, by the way, which the crazy condensed schedule is that we wouldn't get we've seen a lot of these crazy games where you look at the 10-2 games or the 8-0 type of games that we've seen, and we've seen a few of them, which has been around the NHL. That's just you see a lot of. I was talking to some people around the AHL. I mean, some talent evaluators, some scouts, and they said, yeah, it's a condensed schedule. Players are giving up in games, or it's becoming a toll on these players. Where when you're down 3-0 in the first period, you're like, yeah, this game's out of reach. Let's punt on it, and they do. It happens. So you're not seeing that. You're seeing some crazy hat tricks. I think January had 31 hat tricks in 30 days or something crazy. 31-31. You're seeing a lot of those crazy hat tricks that are happening. Yeah, just a lot of craziness that's happening because of that. And I don't, yeah, we wouldn't have had that if it was a regular, normal schedule instead of condensed one. All right. I guess that's all we got. It's all fun. We got a lot covered, a lot of sliding doors. Your mind's probably still racing on some of them. So, but Alex, thanks for joining. While you're here, any plugs? You always got obviously top great Devils coverage, but any other stuff? Obviously, the trade deadline lingering that you want to plug.
Yeah, I mean, for the as far as Devils coverage, me doing something for my Substack tomorrow on how these next two games for them, since they're against the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Islanders, that's basically their season. If they lose both of them, I would imagine they're going to be sellers coming out of the Olympic break. So I'll have that coverage of those games, and then I mean, as far as the Olympic break goes, probably be looking at trade stuff, but I think that as far as the Devils goes, just have to wait to see how these two games go, and then I'll get into like more in-depth trade stuff. For the hockey writers, I'm expecting probably a couple of trades before we get to the roster freeze here on Wednesday, so I'll hopefully have those covered too, but nothing cemented yet as far as new articles go.
It's funny with the trades because yeah, our Tommy Panarin was sat out, and I actually
That's
wrote
what
up an
I was
article.
thinking.
I
Yeah.
wrote up an article over the weekend about the Panarin fits potentially, and I think everyone's had it at this point speculation about where he's going. But as I'm writing that, I'm like, any moment he'd get traded, and this whole article is going to go to waste. And
Yeah.
as of now, as of Monday afternoon, he has not been traded, and you know it's going to happen for the freeze. So because I mean they're not going to just sit him out the
Yeah, they
entire
can't do that. Yeah, they can't send him out for a month.
yeah the entire Olympic break. So it's going to be fascinating to see, and there are going to be trades. A lot of people want to get their work done before the Olympics, especially players that are going to the Olympics, where you don't want to maybe risk an injury or some teams that they want to get their work done. They want to know if they're buyers or sellers before then. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see. But that's all we got. Everyone, we hope you enjoyed. Please check out Alex's work at NJD on the Rush at his Substack, and check out all his work at the Hockey Writers. You can check out my work at Hockey Hot Stove. And we hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and so you can subscribe to YouTube. Mike Fink Hockey Writer. But hopefully there's no spelling issues with that. But subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can find all the episodes of Ice Time and some good shorts as well, which are a minute long. So that should be fun. And we hope you enjoyed. And please tune in next time for another great episode. Thank you.